be a millionaire. But there's something belonging to others. There's enough for all people to share. When it's done,
we're going to have an interesting conversation tonight, and that's the way that we are going to run it. Instead of a panel where everybody speaks and does like a symposium type of structure, we're going to have a conversation. And I think that that's the best way that we can run it. We have 4 really good people up here, and then you have me. So to my left are Judge Jim Dimos, and also former Senator Don Kelly. And to my right, we have former Mayor of Shreveport, Cedric Glover, and we have Mr. Foster Campbell, who is on the Public Service Commission and has run just about everything that you can imagine. You have more face time than I do on press. Just thought I'd let you know that. I'm happy that we have this group. What I thought we would do is I'll throw out an idea, and let me know what you think of it, and please speak up and participate, okay? I want to start with a very, very brief thing on Buddy Roemer. I'm not going to step on anybody's toes, I hope, other than to say this. Governor Roemer was in office between 1988 and 1992. He, more than anybody in the latter part of the 20th century, in my estimation, came into office at such a strange time. Because 4 years before he came in, Louisiana was thrown into not a recession, but a depression. We look back at it now and know that it lasted 10 years. And he threw everything that he could out just to see what would work. And he was remarkably successful in some things and remarkably unsuccessful in others, but most of what he wanted came about after he left office. So with that preface, let's start this. Let's talk about political origins. The Roemer family's political leanings and their activities. Who wants to start? Don't be bashful.
I'll go ahead and start. I met Buddy Roemer in the Constitutional Convention. He and I served together, became very close friends. As a result, became real close friends with his mom, his dad. And then, of course, when we finished the convention, we came back home. Buddy was over there at Scopina. I was in Natchitoches practicing law, but I was constantly running back and forth to Shreveport, and I would stop and visit. And that was a family that was a true family. I mean, it was the mama and the daddy and the kids, and everyone were there to eat dinner every day. And if you were a guest, you fit right in with them. What kind of people were they? I think they were great. And I think they were interested in politics at that time, but you didn't know that at that time. And they had a yearning. They had the greatest family relationship I've ever seen in my life. And I've been close to some people with big families and all that. But they were great people. I think that parlayed into their politics later, and I think that's where they started. There's also a question on this thing too. Says, well, what do you think? Were they liberal or conservative? I always thought the Roemers were very conservative when it came to finances. I thought they were liberals when it came to social issues.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll be glad to go second.
Go ahead.
I didn't know Buddy Roemer that well. We had run into each other as JCs. He was a member of the Bossier JCs, and I was a member of the Monroe JCs, maybe 2 or 3 times at state board meetings. But I was speaking to a Rotary Club in West Monroe when I was delivered a message, call your office urgent. So you never know what in the world is happening, urgent. Thought somebody in the family was sick. I called my secretary and she says, Buddy Roemer would like to talk to you. Call him right now. So I called Buddy Roemer and he said, how would you like to be Speaker of the House? And even back in those days, and it's ever since, and I think these gentlemen will confirm, that the governor has a lot to do with who gets to be Speaker and President of the Senate. Now, I understand that the Senate has done something different this year. They're going to vote their own man in without the governor's input. I don't know if that's going to work or not. But in the House, they haven't changed things. And I understand there's about 12 candidates talking about wanting to be Speaker of the House. Well, back then, I had no idea to even run being a Speaker of the House. But I got this message, how would you like to be Speaker of the House? So I said, well, Governor, I'm honored, I'm humbled. He said, come visit with me this Saturday in Baton Rouge. So I did, and we started working. He said, you're going to have to make calls. I'll make calls. We're going to get you elected. And I didn't know till about a week before we met that we had enough votes to be the Speaker of the House. We had a very popular Edwin Edwards guy by the name of John Valerio, who's now President of the Senate. He changed parties from Democrat to Republican, so he would have a shot at being elected President of the Senate because of Jindal being a Republican. But at any rate, to get back to Roemer, he inherited $1 billion worth of a debt that Edwin Edwards left in '87. So what does he do? He calls in Russell Long from Washington, taxman. He calls in Merrill Lynch advisors, and they finally came up with some ideas: increase sales tax, increase fees, and before you know it, we raised about $900 million, $100 million short of $1 billion. But that got the state moving. And in 5 years, we had paid off the debt. It wasn't during the Roemer administration, but the next administration paid off the sales tax debt. And we're back on track again. He was very, very smart individual. Buddy Roemer was excellent in intellect. But sometimes he ran into problems because of the debt that we had incurred. He cut out the supplemental pay for police officers, firefighters, state police. He made the teachers mad at him because he gave pay raises to the teachers 3 out of the 4 years he was governor. But because they had to take a test and reevaluate every 5 years, they were mad at him. So Robert Adley, and I miss him. I was hoping he'd be here tonight. I know you all know Robert Adley. He was the representative and the senator. And I sat down and made a list of all the people he had upset. And we ran out of paper. But at any rate, again, to his credit, he was very articulate, very bright. I enjoyed serving with him, and I appreciated his confidence in me that he would support me for being Speaker of the House.
That's great. I mean, absolutely. It's the kind of thing that historians love. I was talking to Kate Archer Kent on public radio. She's my producer on History Matters. And we were talking about this event. And she says, well, how would you describe it? And I said, well, everybody likes sausage in the end, but while history's being made and interpreted, it's like watching it. And this is the process. This is the way it ought to be. Who were the voters that supported Governor Roemer, and how did he position himself as a reformer? Mr. Campbell?
Well, let me be honest, I wasn't one of his voters.
I know.
I was not one of his voters. Look, if you'd have had this this forum 8 years ago, I'd have had a lot more critical things to say than I do today. But after Bobby Jindal, Buddy Roemer looks like a champion. And I mean that with sincerity, because there's no doubt in my mind that Buddy Roemer had a good heart. I don't know about the fellow we got now, but Buddy Roemer had a good heart. He cared about people. And we can differ about how you get there, but if you care about people, that's the big deal. You know, if you got a cold heart, that's tough to deal with. When you cut this, you cut that, and you cut this because you're doing it for political processes and how it's going to make you look down the road, which is exactly what's happened today in Louisiana. But Roemer wasn't like that. Roemer had feeling for people. He was one of the best speakers that I've ever heard. I was asked a month or two ago who was the best speakers I've ever heard. The finest speaker I've ever heard in my life was John Connally, who was a governor of Texas. He was the greatest. Kelly might remember, he came to the legislature and he made a speech when he was running for president. He kept you just spellbound. And the next one probably was 60 Rayburn, who we served with, was a great speaker, a country guy that they asked him why they call you 60. He said he never made higher than 60 on a test, but that was not true. He was one of the smartest guys. He was a great speaker. And then Roemer was a great speaker. Roemer had the gift, and I believe the way he spoke from the heart, but he was a good speaker and a great communicator. I know you're going to get to this later, but I believe the only thing that got Buddy Roemer beat, his cardinal sin, as a politician, he never should have switched to the Republican Party. He would have won just like that against Edwin Edwards, and when he did, when he switched over to the Republican Party, then everything broke loose for Roemer. You had Edwin Edwards and David Duke, and I was telling Donnie this, and Jim Dimos. Clyde Holloway was in the same race. Now here's Buddy Roemer switching to from the Democratic Party, coming from a real Democratic family now, switching over to the Republican Party, which I know personally that his mother didn't like, and some of his siblings didn't like. He switched, gives up all this political IOUs and everything he had as a Democrat to go to the Republican Party, and then the Republican Party pays him back in a race by endorsing Clyde Holloway. Just like is happening today. I was telling Donnie this. Jay Darden has been the right-hand guy of the Republican Party ever since he was in Boy State, all the way through. What did they do the other day? The Baton Rouge Republican Party, they endorse Angel and Vitter and don't endorse Darden. It's incredible, incredible. But then Roemer got in the runoff, or would have been in the runoff had he stayed a Democrat, because he got half the black votes, and he'd have been in the runoff with David Duke, and he'd have won. And by that time, I think he would have been a better governor, because he had some ups and downs. He was a guy that was full of vinegar, and he had a lot of things on his plate, and he wanted to do a lot of things, and he learned a lot. He learned a lot in the legislature by knowing he had to work with people. He wasn't good at that at first, but everybody realizes now that you got to work with the legislature if you get things done. But as a whole, as I look back, there's one thing you can say about Buddy Roemer as a great asset. I've never heard anybody say Buddy Roemer was a thief. I think he was honest. I never think he did anything to benefit himself. And I can't say that about all the governors, and you can't either. Nobody can. We've had some governors that just didn't do right. But I think Roemer, if he made mistakes, he did it because he thought it was right. I've never heard anybody say that Buddy Roemer actually did anything to steal or did anything dishonest.
Remarkable position for a Louisiana governor.
It is. It is. That says a lot, because we've had some doozies. Yeah.
It is Louisiana.
Yeah.
Mayor Glover?
When I think of Buddy Roemer, the thing that comes to mind is in the South, Louisiana in particular, there is no greater manifestation of disparate opportunity than the plantation. And Buddy was very much aware of the fact that he was a son of a plantation, a son of privilege. And I think the thing that impressed me about him was that he felt the burden of the obligation that he felt that was upon him and others who came from privilege, who were blessed by the parents that they were born to. And I think that that's the perspective that he brought to his public life. And he brought with it an energy and a sense of commitment and a focus that was extremely commendable. I think, as has been mentioned, the unfortunate reality of it is that I think the great challenge that Buddy never managed to overcome is the difference between, I think, as Mario Cuomo put it, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. And so he was wonderful with the poetry of the campaign, being able, as Foster just referenced, to be able to use the English language to raise spirits, to inspire folks, to get you energized and focused. But then once you get elected, you've got the challenge of day-to-day governing, and that boils down to your willingness to wade out and do the rough and dirty work of connecting, building relationships, and pulling together coalitions that allow you to be able to actually affect and advance the things that you want to. And I think that that's one of the areas where, unfortunately, he lacked. I think the other thing that's also very significant about Governor Roemer is that, if memory serves correct, he may be the very first of our near or actual baby boom governors, born in 1943, so that puts him in pretty close proximity. He was a 1960 graduate of Bossier High, put him in college in the early 60s, grad school in the late 60s, and so he came of age during, from my perspective, it's the time I was born, but as I've studied history, I think it's probably one of the most convulsive times in the history of the country. And so I think he also felt an obligation to be a leader of the change that he was a part of and saw coming as a young man, and wanted to see that change come to Louisiana, and come to Louisiana in a way, to borrow, I guess, what Foster referred to, not in line with the tradition of the governors that we had that stole from us.
I agree with that. Of course, his byline was the Roemer Revolution.
Correct.
And I think you're right. I think it had as much to do about age and his position as anything else. Well, in the conversation, we've come up with something, and his approach to the legislature. And I'm sure all of you here can talk about this, but not only the legislature, but the media and the federal government. What are your thoughts on Governor Roemer's dealings with both the House and the Senate?
Well, the feds, I can't answer that question, because I don't know what his dealings were when dealing with the federal government. When dealing with the press, I felt like Buddy was probably as astute as anyone I've ever seen when it came to dealing with the press. He knew what he was doing, he knew how to do it, and as a result, he usually always got good press, whether it was right or wrong. He usually got it. As far as his dealing with the legislature, I think that was his biggest problem in the 4 years that we were down there with him, especially Foster and I. I never will forget, I feel like that I led him astray right after he was elected governor. He was elected, Edwin said he wasn't going to run, so he became the governor. I took off and went to Colorado for 3 weeks, which was the biggest mistake, as far as I'm concerned, I could make, because I always felt like I had a great deal of influence with Buddy. But in that 3-week period that I was gone, John Hankel and Pepe Bruno got a hold of him, and those guys are to the right of Attila the Hun, or were, and I don't know, Buddy floated over there, and when he did, by the time I got back from Colorado, it was too late. And we tried to get him to make some changes. I tried to use some logic with him with dealing with the legislature. A lot of people don't understand. When Edwin Edwards left office, when was Buddy there? 80, what'd you say?
88.
92.
88. When Edwin left, And Foster will tell you this. We had a group of senators down there that were as concise and as close as anything could be. We had about 22 or 23 votes in that Senate, and we could do just about anything we wanted to. And that was with Sammy Nunez as the president. I begged Buddy Roemer not to get rid of Nunez, because I said, if you do, you're going to split this Senate wide open. And that group, and I can sit here, I could name all of them, there's probably 18 or 19 of them, including Foster Campbell, that are going to fight you for the rest of this term. Well, they fought him all right until such time as they garnered the votes back to expel his president of the Senate, which was Alan Barres, which was a great man, fine man, but he didn't have the leadership ability that Sammy Nunez had. And so then Nunez and his group came back into power. To me, that was foolish on Buddy's part for going in there saying, I'm going to make change for the sake of change. I told him over and over, I said, Leonard Chabert, who I lived with, I said, Nunez, John Saunders, these guys will be as loyal to you as they've been to Edwin. But he didn't take my word for it. And as a result, therein, in my opinion, is what caused him his particular problems in the Louisiana State Senate. I can't speak for the House, but because Adley shared the same position I did over in the House of Representatives. He was Buddy's floor leader in the House, but I think he could have improved his dealings with the Louisiana State Senate if he'd have followed my advice a little more.
In the House, Buddy assigned Tom Casey, a lawyer from New Orleans, to meet with Adley and I and a couple others just about every afternoon to go over a list of the bills that we could support and that we had to oppose. We did this every day between 1 and 1:30 before we went into the House chamber. He would periodically, like every couple of weeks, invite at least 30, 40 House members at the mansion and feed them lunch. So we had a pretty good rapport in the House because of his way that he handled the situation. We had a good relationship. We passed a lot of the tax measures that we sent over to the Senate. Luckily, they went along with it because we had to generate $900 to $1 billion to balance the budget, which is a constitutional mandate in the state of Louisiana. We cannot leave a budget in the hole. We have to have a balanced budget. During this administration, we created the conference committee made up of the Speaker, the President of the Senate, an economist from LSU, which I think is Dr. Jim Richardson, is still on that committee, and the governor's representative. And those four would meet periodically to see how the income is flowing in, the expenditures going out, to make sure that at the end of the year we have a balanced budget to meet the constitutional mandate. But he did a good job. He got a good rapport with the House members, and until maybe, like Foster said, he changed parties. Things started going downhill after that. But the first 2 years of his administration, we did great things. And he was a reform governor. He tried to reform a lot of good things. And after he changed parties, things started falling down.
Mr. Campbell?
I was on the other side in the Senate. We had some problems, Buddy and I did, but anyway, I voted for Nunez. And if I had that vote back today, I would have voted to leave Alan Barres, the President of the Senate. I made the wrong vote that day. But a lot of times when you get in heated confrontation with people, you don't always just do the right thing. You might think you're doing the right thing, but your emotions get involved, and sometimes you just don't do the right thing. And but Byres, like Donnie said, he was a real gentleman and meant well, but he didn't have the ability to corral everybody. We had about 20 people over there that was used to going along or getting along with Edwin Edwards. I liked Edwin. I didn't like all of his ways, but he was easy for me to deal with, because when you call Edwin, basically as a senator, and you live in North Louisiana, I didn't want to be around him much, but if I call Edwin, he'd call you back. And that was such a good quality he had. Somebody in Ringo called me and said, we got a problem here. I could call him, and within 2 hours, he'd call you back. Now, he was real sharp when he called you back. He didn't call you back and say, hey, Foster, how you doing? He'd call you back and say, what you need? That was all I wanted to talk to him. You tell him I can handle it, or have somebody call you. But that was a good asset. And Roemer didn't call everybody back like that. I know he was busy, but he didn't have the same mindset there. He just didn't call everybody back. So after a year or so, people got sort of fed up with that, because they were used to dealing with Edwin and walking in and say, how you doing? Can you help me? Yes or no? And Buddy was more methodical, and he didn't call you back as quickly. So he was harder to get along with. But Donnie just put his finger on it. Had Roemer gone in there, and he was full of the newspapers. They were all, this Shreveport paper, Howard Bronson was building him up. And all of a sudden, Howard Bronson hated Edwin Edwards, and Edwin Edwards was the bad guy, whatever you think, and Roemer was the good guy. Well, Roemer didn't feel like he could go down there and put up with Edwin Edwards' group of folks. That's basically what he said, So he had to redo everything. So he comes into the Senate where, like, if he'd have taken Kelly's advice, look, I know what you think, just be calm, we can work with these folks too, and they will pass your agenda. But no, Roemer had to go in and split it up and elect his guy, and then automatically he made everybody else put the Dukes up. So then you got half the Senate with the Dukes up, and then anything came up, you had your Dukes up. Well, and then finally, Roemer not calling people back or this and that, and no big deal, but I mean, he didn't do anything mean to anybody, he just didn't call them back or whatever, and it just kept growing and growing, and then they had a vote, and then Sammy Nunes wins the president of the Senate, and Roemer's handpicked guys out. Well, then he's behind the 8 ball, because everything, then he's got to go get the folks that didn't vote for him to help him. But had he listened to Kelly, and I never heard him tell that story, but that's probably the best thing, the worst thing ever happened to Roemer is when he went to Colorado to deer hunting. Because had he been there, he had enough sense to tell him, you can't listen to Pepe Bruno, you can't listen to John Hankel, because if you do, they won't be able to do anything for you over here. I hear what they're telling you, it sounds good, it makes the newspapers happy, but it's going to get you beat. That's basically, he didn't tell you that, but that's basically what he's saying. And he was telling the truth. Had he come in there and said, look, let's deal with who we got and let me handle it, because Kelly had, he won't tell you this, but Kelly had more power in the Senate than any of them at that particular time, and he could have guided Roemer through over a lot of hurdles that would have helped him. But Roemer, with the newspaper saying it was a revolution. Roemer felt like I got to lead the revolution. Well, he led the revolution and cut the Senate in half, and you don't need but 20 votes in the Senate and you can do anything, and he lost it. And once he lost it, that was his power. But I agree with Mr. Mr. Dimos, and I think everybody up here. The worst thing Buddy Roemer ever did was switch from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, because Republicans never liked Buddy Roemer, because he really is no Republican. He switched, and they didn't get over it, and he lost his power in the Democratic Party. Had Roemer stayed a Democrat, he'd have beat Edwin Edwards like that. Edwin Edwards would have never run. He'd got reelected. I don't know where he'd be today, but he wouldn't have got defeated after 4 years, I can tell you that. And I don't know if he'd admit it, but that's my personal opinion.
Mayor Glover?
I think that the party switch issue became reflective of something that we've seen come to full fruition to date, and that is the transitioning of the South from being solidly Democratic, both in terms of boll weevil white Democrats and the African American community to being now read in just about every way. But I think these gentlemen are correct that the individuals who gave Governor Roemer that advice, that the best thing for him to do within the context of the 1991 election was to become a Republican, gave him horrible advice because it put the black community in a posture of not feeling in any way compelled or committed to voting for him based upon the general perceptions of Republicans. And it opened up the door for Governor Edwards' candidacy and essentially put him in that position of being the person who, if he makes the runoff, even as a Republican, he still gets to be governor. But if you don't have sufficient base vote to get you to the first or the second spot, then what happens in a runoff is inconsequential because you're the third man out.
And he learned that pretty easily.
Let me add one thing.
Sure.
This reminds me, the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Lyndon Johnson was the president. Sam Rayburn was the Speaker of the House. When they got through passing that bill that day, Lyndon, as he always did, went down to Sam Rayburn's office to have a highball. He goes down to Rayburn's office and he tells, and Sam Rayburn's congratulating him on, oh man, you know, you did great, Mr. President, you passed your civil rights bill. And Lyndon supposedly said to him, that's all fine and good, Sam, but we've carried the South for the last time. Now that ought to tell you something after what you've seen come through the years since 1964.
It was a seminal time, and I think it had a lot of push behind it to make changes that nobody at the time thought. I think President Johnson understood it as well as anybody else, and nobody gave him credit for it at the time. As a matter of fact, the animosity toward him in the South, of course, increased tremendously to the point that I believe he thought he couldn't survive another election. Well, all of this leads to something else. Governor Roemer had some grand ideas on, out of necessity, because of that $1 billion hole, of changing tax policies and laws and educational policies. And how do you think his leadership style impacted the results of these agendas, what he wanted to do? Whoever wants to start.
I'll be glad to.
Okay.
As you said, he had great ideas. He was a very intelligent human being. He wanted the teachers to be reevaluated every 5 years, which meant testing, whoever created the testing. They never forgave him for that, so he lost that group. He cut out the supplemental pay for the state troopers, sheriffs, firefighters for 1 year. After we balanced the budget, they got their money back, but they never forgave him, particularly the teachers, many more teachers. Because of the reevaluation, he had helped raise their pay 3 out of the 4 years he was governor. But because they had to be reevaluated every 5 years, they never forgave him. He had bright ideas. He was a revolutionary. He wanted to change things the way they had been in the past. He had great ideas. But because he failed with that set of people, he could never muster enough votes to continue improving things for the state.
I'm going to make this short and sweet for you.
Okay.
After 12 years of handling tax bills for Edwin Edwards and Buddy Roemer, I can't remember which ones I handled for which governor. So I'm going to let that, y'all, some of the rest of you have to figure that out.
I got nothing. Mr.
Campbell
Campbell?
voted against all those taxes.
Well, I understand.
You know, look, I almost feel like I'm in a confession. Look,
Talk to us, my son.
I've said some tough things about Buddy Roemer, but like I told you, lately, man, look, he looks so good compared to what we've seen the last 8 years. I tell you, you have to give him credit. He came in. Here's a guy who you just think about it as a politician. He started off running with no money, and he started off talking about scrubbing the budget. I got sick of hearing that, scrub the budget, but it caught on. Scrub the budget, and it caught on, and it was just like a wave. And it's sort of like something's happening right now. I'm not going to tell you all this, but there's a wave coming right now. I feel it in Louisiana, and if this fella catches a wave like Roemer did, you can't do anything but get out of the way. Because I remember I went to the state fair in October, and all the people showing cattle out there I knew are from all over South Louisiana. They were saying, hey, who is this guy Roemer? Who's this guy Roemer? And I knew it was coming. There was nothing you could do. So I knew that leading that charge of people, coming from nowhere, and winning and putting that together and selling that message, he had to feel like he had to do a lot of real bold things, you know. And like I say, if he'd have just got some good advice from somebody like Rayburn or Kelly or somebody that he could have sat down with and trusted, they could have saved him some bumps in the roads. But he was real eager, and the newspapers were pushing him because the newspapers hated Edwin Edwards, and I understand all that. I'm not trying to defend what they were against. But it was such a bad deal with Edwards, and Roemer looked like the white knight. And so they were pushing Roemer. You remember all the newspapers endorsed Buddy Roemer on the same day? Now you got to give somebody credit that can get every newspaper in the state to endorse them on one Sunday. All the newspapers, Monroe, Shreveport, Lafayette, Alexandria, New Orleans, and Baton Rouge, every one of them endorsed him. So you see, they were for him. And I guess he felt this need to say, hey, look, I got to do something. But Buddy just, he let all that get to him rather than getting down to some, like his Sam Rayburn or 60 Rayburn or somebody could have got a hold of him and Kelly and said, look, we can win this thing, but you got to be calm. And he came in like a storm and it burned out. And it's a shame because then he came with his tax policy and he got beat. And once his tax got beat, it was good night Irene then. It was all over. He went out like a light. And I think he was genuinely pushing the tax. He thought was the right thing. But a tax is a hard thing to do. And you had to let the people of Louisiana vote on the tax. That's almost murders, you know. And when the people vote against you, you're out there for it, and you're fixing to run again. You got a long ways to try to pick up, and he just never could. And as a Republican, and when the Republicans denounced him and went with Clyde Holloway, he was a man with no country, you know. He didn't have a chance.
It's a strange thing. Mayor Glover, you, and then I want to start out another question with you.
Okay.
What do you think about this current topic of for lack of a better term, Governor Roemer's style, and you can't really talk a lot about party loyalty when he switches. Do you think, and this will be for all of you, but I want to start out with the mayor. Do you think that the switch caused a perception in how people not only thought about his politics, but his position on the American landscape? Do you think that it defined whether or not he was a liberal or a conservative or middle of the road, or just what's your thoughts?
I think in a very practical sense, it just simply undercut the base of voters that he could effectively appeal to. I think the folks who were advising him believed that the other R revolution was in full effect, the Reagan Revolution, and that he would be well advised to try and catch that wave. The unfortunate truth is, though, is that it did not serve him well. and that in addition to that not serving him well, it came within the context of several things that I think were also a part of the challenge that he faced in '91, and that is, one, there probably is no better singular phrase ever uttered in a political debate before than what Buddy Roemer said at the end of that '87 debate when they all were asked if you are not in the runoff and Edwin Edwards is, will you endorse it? And obviously everybody else struggled with that except for Buddy. And he said, no, I will not. We must slay the dragon. And as history noted, that became the button, the slogan, and the mantra that carried the day. And in fact, it convinced Edwin to give up and to not carry on and ultimately face defeat. But it also denied Buddy the body of his vanquished victim to be able to stand over and be able to say to the folks of Louisiana, I did literally slay the dragon. So you've got a less than full victory coming into office. The challenges that you have while you are in office are great. And the one thing that Buddy, in my estimation, never effectively did was to use the full force of the great personal magnetism that I think he's possessed of to be able to go out and overcome the challenges. As you've heard Foster and the others reference, when you have crossed the teachers and you've crossed firefighters and you've crossed police officers, it becomes highly incumbent upon you to be the kind of leader that manages to go out and try and figure out ways to be able to mend those fences. And if you can't mend them, then you've got to figure out other avenues of opportunity to develop relationships and coalitions that give you a chance at success. But I think there was no move that he made that was singularly more of a contributor to his downfall than the message that was communicated to the 30+% of the electorate in this state that's African American when he changed from being a D to an R. At that point, he could only expect probably, I'm not sure if I can remember exactly what he got, but at that point, you go from having prospects, as Foster mentioned, of upwards of 40 to 50% of that vote to less than 10%. And with that kind of math, you just simply can't get to either the first or second spot. At that point, your election's over.
Do you think that it was tantamount to political suicide when he did it?
I think it was absolutely tantamount to political suicide.
Gentlemen, anybody want to add to that?
I remember a very controversial issue, talking about whether he was liberal or conservative, pro-choice or pro-life. The House passed a pro-life bill. It got to the governor's desk, he vetoed it. And I asked him, I said, Governor, what are you doing? I said, I've talked to too many women in the state. They're not for pro-life. I had to do what I thought was right. Well, first chance the House had was they overrode the veto. And I don't know what the Senate did on that measure, but it just kind of another thing that didn't help him politically.
We did not override, but the substance of those arguments over in the Senate dealt with the exceptions of the life of the mother. And what was the other one, Foster? Rape, incest, and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Health of the mother.
And see, I mean, and if you remember, Jimmy, y'all passed a pure anti-abortion bill. I mean, there were no exceptions in it or anything. And so Roemer, he said that was the reason he vetoed it. He came over there and he got 13 of us to, you know, agree not to override the veto, and we didn't. But that's a pretty tough deal, man. I'm telling you, those ladies, those anti-abortion people, they were over there, Lord, they were talking bad to us, you know. I told one of them, my dear friend Leonard Chabert was dying with cancer at that particular time, and I told her, I said, instead of talking about me, you're supposed to be such a good Christian, why don't you go home and pray for my friend Leonard Chabert? And she didn't say any more after that. Anyhow, but yeah, I'll tell you a few things about Roemer that has not been addressed. I mean, you know, Buddy Roemer passed the first two gaming bills. in this state. I mean, you know, everybody thinks about Edwin being the daddy of gambling and all that. Buddy Roemer passed the lottery. He also passed riverboat gaming. He had the
And truck stop.
he had the foresight and the guts to go do that. Because I'm gonna tell you what, and I'm not from Shreveport, so I can say this. In my opinion, Shreveport would be just another sleepy little North Louisiana town. If those bills had not passed, and you have the opportunities that you have around here now. There was one other area that he, and I had it in my mind a while ago, and it's escaped, which many things do nowadays. But if I think of it, I'll mention it. But that he did something that we ordinarily wouldn't have thought of as a Roemer measure.
Lottery was passed during his time. The lottery was passed during his term.
Yeah. So was riverboat gaming, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't Willie Foster, and
And video poker.
Willie Crane them pass
Video
that?
poker was, I know.
Huh?
Video poker was passed too. as
Yeah,
far
well, I
as-
thought riverboats was. Maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, they were.
No riverboat.
Yeah,
They were. Yeah, they
It
were.
was, because
They were.
the greatest tragedy ever happened in Louisiana, though, you think about it, you think about the political influence now. This sums it up. If you were going to teach civics, if I was teaching ninth grade civics, I could explain Louisiana politics. We passed riverboat gaming, and we have 13 licenses. And that's incredible, isn't it? Then we have 13 licenses. What does that tell you? You know what it tells you. Come see us. Come see Daddy, because somebody's going to be giving them out. Now, Mississippi passes riverboat gaming. What do? Get in it. You go broke, you're broke. But not in Louisiana. We got a little trick here in Louisiana. We're just going to have 13. They're not going to be cheap now. And somebody's going to give them out. So that's all you really got to think about Louisiana. That is sickening what we did. And you know what else they did on riverboats? They put a pilot on a riverboat that doesn't move the riverboat. You got to pay them.
Full crew.
Full crew. Is that incredible?
It's a great job.
Downtown Shreveport, they got a riverboat pilot to the boat that's tied to the street. That's the kind of stuff we do in Louisiana. I mean, it's incredible. Those licenses were not cheap. And we should have never done that. We should have done just like Mississippi and said, look, you want to go in the riverboat business, get with it. Now, when you go broke, you're broke. But in Louisiana, what happened when you know what happens. What happened when you tie up all these licenses, people go to jail. It all happens because it's greed and somebody wants one, and you know how you got to get them. And it was a damn shame. Any ninth grade civics class could understand that. That is a shame what happened to our state. Whether you like riverboats or not, getting them, and we do, like Donnie said, everybody in this town, we got a job, I understand that. But just to say we're going to have 13 and that's it, proof's in the pudding right there what that deal was about.
Built-in corruption.
It was.
Oh, yeah. I have a former student who is a master chief in the Coast Guard, and he's in charge of inspecting these things. And he said that the only terror that he can put into a crew on any one of these gaming boats is to show up unannounced. And then all of a sudden, people start running around, things get done, it's amazing. But he doesn't have to take them out on the cruise because they can't go.
We should have said, hey, you're crazy.
Well, I think it was the plaintiff lawyers that required that, Foster, so they could continue to maintain the maritime claims. No.
That's a thought.
Mention that to Foster.
I remember the first time, we have the collection of them here in Shreveport, and your concept of a sleepy little town, it's a big sleepy little town, but it's still a sleepy little town. And a friend of mine came in from out of state, and he sees all these, really large boats, and he says, "That's the best 19th century naval base I've ever seen in my life." Well, yeah, it is. One last question. We're about 5 minutes out. For each of you, What's Governor Roemer's legacy for the ages, not for just the short term? That's a simple one, isn't it?
You want to start?
Go ahead. Oh, I will. Don't make me.
Go ahead.
I think his legacy will be that he was a true reformer. See, I don't think you can take that away from him. The fact that, I mean, he came in as a person who wanted to reform. He didn't always accomplish it, but that doesn't label him as a non-reformer. I mean, I think that's going to be his ultimate legacy. I think he's honest as the day is long. I think that will be a legacy that he will have throughout. And, you know, it's just such a shame. I mean, I've never been as disappointed in all my life. Buddy and I were close. And I mean, when he got to be governor, I was elated. I said, man, we're gonna do some things. This guy has the greatest opportunity in 50 years to do what needs to be done in this state. And then, lo and behold, I mean, you know, he got sidetracked and it didn't happen. But I don't put all the fault on him for that. I mean, we're all at fault for that general failure. But I think his legacy will be great. I really do. Reformer, honest.
That's great.
I agree totally with that comment by Mr. Kelly. The one thing that sticks out in the tax package, he also came up with like 4 cents or 8 cents tax on gasoline to create a road fund. And it started out great, but over the years, governors have invaded, I think particularly Jindal, your favorite Governor Foster, invaded the kitty that was created to improve the roads and highways.
He robbed it. He didn't invade it.
Yeah, he robbed it. So anyway, that stuck out in my mind.
Mr. Campbell?
I'm sort of like, I'm not like this guy, but I like what he said. Senator Byrd from up in West Virginia, he said he never served under any president. I don't think I ever served under any governor. I worked with them. By far, and this is crazy because when he was governor, I didn't jihad with him much. The most honest governor that I've ever served with, without a doubt, was Dave Treen. He was a decent, honest man, and he couldn't get much done either. He was for something I'm for, was an offshore oil and gas tax, and Treen was absolutely right. I think you got to say about Buddy Roemer is that he was an honest fellow. He actually, I don't think he ever tried to cut a deal. I think he tried to do what was right. He just got off on the wrong foot. And I think that all this revolution that he created, and he made all the great speeches, and all the newspapers were pumping him up once he got elected. I think he could have used a little common sense there. Somebody could have talked to him to deal with some down-home politics rather than all the grandiose ideas. He could have got them passed. But as a whole, I think history will be kind to him because he was honest and he tried, and he had a lot of success in his particular programs.
Mayor?
I think for those who are fans of the late John McGinnis, in one of his books, he begins by talking about the two political extremes that exist in Louisiana. One being the Bourbon class, the landed gentry, those possessed of the wealth, the plantation, for lack of a better term for it, and the pirate king, which embodied, I guess, in the 20th century, and Huey Long, and more recently, and Edwin Edwards, and what have you. I think that Buddy Roemer represented the best effort, to my recollection, to try and find a third way, that middle path, whether you call that a reformer or what have you. I think that he had the opportunity to be able to try and balance both of those two extremes and find a way that would lead to a better future for Louisiana. As a young man who was in his late teens and early 20s as all of this unfolded, it was something that was inspirational for me and I think others who listened, who heard, who learned, and who today still struggle to try and find that Louisiana balance between the Bourbons and the Pirate Kings.
Well said. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and those of you in the audience for coming. This is how history is made, because when things happen, it's current events. But when you look at them, when you look at the issues and you dissect them, then you're creating history. And I think that's what we're trying to do tonight. So thank you very much, and thank you, LEH. We appreciate your coming up here and being here and doing everything that you do in our edge of the state. So have a good evening.
Every man a king, for you can be a millionaire. But there's something belonging to others